A long time ago, I believed in an almighty, all-powerful, all-everything God. And I used to tell everybody about that, and I used to tell them that this God that I believed in could do absolutely anything. And I used to drive my friends absolutely crazy, telling them all this stuff all the time. And one day, one of my friends, who was a bit of a smart aleck, one day he came to me and he said, "Right, here's the deal. I am going to believe everything that you believe, and I'll even come to church, but only if tomorrow morning there is a garden on the school roof." And I thought, no sweat. My God can do anything. My God is all-powerful and almighty and all-everything. And so I prayed so hard, and not just me, I told other people to pray too, and I rang my minister even and said, "Look, this is what's happening, and I need you to pray for it too." And he listened to what was going on, and he said, "I think you'd better come and see me." There was no garden on the school roof the next morning. In the wake of the Christchurch earthquake, there's been a lot of things said about God's role in all that. Deans and bishops and even archbishops have talked about whether or not this was an act of God and what that might mean. And some of those have been great statements, and I've really found them helpful personally. A few days after the earthquake, I spoke in the church that I'm fortunate enough to minister in, and I talked openly and honestly about how I felt about that stuff. And I made it clear that I don't believe that God was in control on February 22nd. I don't believe that God could have stopped that earthquake. And I don't believe in a God who doesn't intervene because God doesn't want to. Now, for some people, that was a really hard thing to hear. For some people, and I guess all of us sometimes, we desperately want to believe that God is in control when everything else is turning to rubbish in our lives. We really want to believe that somehow there's a plan and somehow God has God's finger on it all. And that would be a wonderful thing to believe for some, but not for me. For me, I have to say, for me that would be so much worse. Because if I believed that God was in control, and if I believed that God could have stopped that earthquake, and if I believed that God could have stopped those people dying and chose not to, that would be terrible. That would be awful. And I wouldn't want to believe in a God who would do that. So that leaves us with a question. If God's not in control, then who is? Because it's obvious that we're not, because we're not stopping these things either. So if God's not in control and we're not in control, then who is? And maybe where that question leads us is the thought that perhaps actually no one's in control. And maybe control isn't the point in the first place. If an almighty, all-powerful, everything God isn't real, then where does that leave us?